Well, hello and welcome everybody from Southside Virginia Community College. My name is Tim Paul Duffy. It's such a pleasure to get to connect with all of you who are watching this live and for those who are going to be watching the recording. I really want to give a special thanks to Vondrina and an entire team to make this event possible. So let's jump right into the presentation so that you can get the most value out of this training. This is a training sponsored by the department celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. All right, so let's jump in. What is this training going to be about? Professional success. It's not only about applying for a job, but also keeping and succeeding at your job. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So what are going to be the learning outcomes? First, I'm going to share with you a little bit about myself. You learn about me, where I grew up, my career. How did I come to actually talk about this topic? Part two of this training is we're going to learn how to apply for a job. I'm going to give you basically 11 principles to help you get your dream job or internship. I'm also going to be playing a video of a friend of mine, Nando Rodriguez, who is a breakthrough coach. He was also a former recruiter for jobs, and he has some amazing insights about LinkedIn and social media that I think all of you can really benefit from. And then the third part of this training, again, as you can see, we're going to be covering a lot of stuff. We're going to learn how to keep your job. Let's say that once you actually achieve and get that dream job, well, how do you keep it? How do you succeed? How do you get ahead? So I'm going to be sharing with you, again, all my professional mistakes, because I think that you can learn from not only people's successes, but where they screwed up. And I'm happy to share you where I screwed up. And then really understanding this dynamic between an employee and a manager. And, I really wish by serving as a manager, which I have served as a manager, I've managed over 600 part-time interns. I managed over 40 different employees. It's almost the information in this training is I wish that every employee knew, that I bet every manager wish every employee knew, so that they could succeed at their role. And then we're going to challenge some of these myths about how to get it promoted and how to get ahead. Now, even though we're going to be covering a lot of content in this training, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. Why? Is because once you complete all this type of training, at the end, there's going to be a post assessment where I'm going to say, I really will love your feedback. What did you like about the presentation? What action steps are you going to take? What can be done to improve? And then once you submit that, you'll get a thank you page, and you're going to be able to get a lot of different gifts that I'm going to be giving to you as resources. One of them is this entire PowerPoint presentation. So again, I love for you to take notes because it helps retain that information, but also don't be too stressed out if you don't get everything, because that download of that handout will be available for you. So let's join in this presentation together. If you can turn on your camera, I would be great, just because I get to see faces. It makes it much more of a dynamic presentation. If you can, I understand. Don't worry. I don't care about messed up hair in your pajamas, whatever you might be, wherever you might are. So don't worry about that. Okay. So let's jump right in. So let me start off with my story. So look at this adorable little baby. This is me, Timothy Paul Duffy. I grew up in Oceanside, California. A very, very chubby baby with blonde hair, but somehow I ended up getting brown. Who knows how these things work. And this is my mother and this is my father. My mother is Luz Cristina Lopez. She was actually born in Argentina. Her mother, which is my grandmother on my mother's side, she was actually born in Bolivia. So they actually had to move from Bolivia to escape political persecution. Again, during that time, there was a lot of, political conflict. Well, they eventually moved to New York, and my mother didn't actually speak a word of English. She actually had to learn English by watching soap operas, and that's how she was able to improve her English language. She actually graduated high school, and then she went to a church, and that's where she met my father, David Duffy. He is a doctor. He's a retired doctor right now. A very, very smart guy, went to Harvard Medical School, but just because you can go to an Ivy League prestigious school doesn't mean you're going to be successful or not. He had a rough life, ended up going bankrupt at the age of 40. My parents divorced. And so I ended up, after the divorce, it was a very bitter custody battle. I ended up living with my mother in California. So that's just a little bit of my background and my story. So living with my mother was a very interesting thing because we were very poor. And how that showed up is we didn't have money. My mother would be working at the local mall. She found a job in a department store. And guess what? The mall became my babysitter, right? So we had nothing to eat. So what could we do? We only had some loose change in our pocket. So if you guys are not familiar with a pizzeria restaurant called Sabaro, it is just a chain of different pizzerias, and you can buy these breadsticks, and that's all we could afford. So what my brother and I would do, we would buy these breadsticks and we would say, can we please have a cup of sauce? And so they would give us a cup of the marinara sauce, and then we would go to the back section where you could put Parmesan cheese, and they kept it in these little cups. My brother and I, when no one was looking, would take off the top of these cups and pour half the bottle of the cheese. And so that was our nutrition. So we'd be able to like dip the bread in that cheesy sauce, and that was what our lunch was. And then when we didn't have anything other money to buy something, well, I was very young and very agile. My brother's like, let's go collect cans for money. So my brother would go to the apartment complexes, toss me into the garbage bins, and he's like, Timmy, you find different cans. And I would search and find all cans, and we would recycle all of them. And then, boy, we would go to 7-Eleven, buy nachos and candy and stuff like that. But this is, how we grew up. I could go into a lot many more stories, but eventually, whenever I would go over the summers, I would visit my father in New York, along with my grandparents who also lived in New York. And they started to realize that I needed a lot of help and support. I was very sickly. I was very short for my age. They took me to the doctors and they thought that I was stunted in my growth. It wasn't that. It was just that I wasn't getting the proper protein and nutrition for me to grow. And so at one point, my grandparents says, you know what, why don't you come live with us? And it was one of the hardest decisions that I ever made. And I remember talking with my brothers about it. And sometimes, to do something that's very risky sometimes has the biggest reward. And so because I had moved around so much when I was a young kid with my mother, I said, you know what? I can make new friends. Don't worry about it. And I said, I called up my mother and I said, I'm not coming back to California, and she cried and was sad, but this was the best decision that I've ever made in my life. And so my life transformed once I lived in New York. My grandparents took me in. My dad was too busy working to take care of us. So guess what happened? My grandparents became my parents, and they helped me with my education, and they helped me with my nutrition. Within 1 or 2 years, boom, I shot up to almost 6 feet tall from being like 5'4" or 5'6" for like years. And I'm just so very grateful. So that's when my life changed. I finished my 2 years of high school here in New York. Then I went to Queens College at the City University of New York. And that's where my whole world opened up, right? Just like as all of you are in college, it just opens up all these different opportunities. So what ended up happening was I became a very active student leader, got involved in the student government. For us, it was called Student Association. And boy, that was like an eye-opening world to me. It's like, oh, you're a leader. You can be a leader. You can be someone of importance and influence. And I'm like, I love this. And I thought I was weak because I cared about people so much. Like, you're a weakling, but it's like, no, it's your passion and empathy. It's what makes you potentially to be a very good leader. I'm like, sign me up. So I attended every leadership retreat that I did. I majored in environmental science geology. I had a Bachelor of Science, but also minor in business. But what I started to discover in college, which is a great place to figure out, what do I care about? What am I passionate about? And I started to realize it was about leadership and about making a difference. So fast forward, I graduated. I work in government. I worked for the division of the EPA. The EPA usually regulates businesses, but I was part of a program to actually incentivize business, not through punishment, but through incentives to get them to be more sustainable. It was a very interesting program. Did that for a year. After that, I worked in local government, and that's where, when people say, I want a stop sign on my street, or I'm complaining about my neighbor's property that's all messed up. Well, guess who they were calling? They were calling me. I was the legislative aide. I was the one picking up all the phones and hearing everybody complain about everything. Very interesting experience. And the council person, who was a lawyer by day, he would become a council person at night. So at nighttime, he would come in and I would tell him all about the day. I'm like, here's what happened, here's what we're going to do, and things like that. So it was kind of my own little fiefdom that I really learned a lot about local government. after I did that, even though I was working in government, I still had a passion for leadership development. So I would go back to Queens College and train the student government leaders there. So I always knew that I had a passion for leadership. And so once I had gotten kind of tired about working in government, I really kind of knew that government really wasn't for me, or maybe not now, because I just was kind of I just say disappointed that I realized how much money influences government. For example, if you're going to become a politician, the chances of you winning, it depends upon how much of a war chest you have and how much money you have saved and how much money you've collected from donors, because that can determine all your marketing dollars. So again, it was a very, very eye-opening thing for me. But love training student leaders. My mentor, Gary Turak, who the founder of the National Society of Leadership and Success, said, Tim, why don't you work for me? You know, you were a great student president. You started your own chapter of the National Society of Leadership and Success, NSLS, at your college. Help us grow. And I'm like, let's do it. And so I jumped into that. I worked there for 12 years, if you could believe it. And there we grew NSLS to become the largest collegiate leadership society in the country, with over 700 chapters, over 1 million members. And even this logo that you can see right there, I helped design this version of the logo. And my biggest chuckle was when, as I was leaving, the last year I worked at NSLS, they hired a marketing agency to basically say, let's revamp our logo. And they paid them thousands upon thousands of dollars to redesign the logo. They tested it and they said, guess what? This logo is the best logo, not even all these new logos that they created. So again, I get a little tickle out of that, but I'm very happy about that. After NSLS, worked in the startup world, served as a CEO of 2 startup companies. But even though I was doing this, I still missed the leadership development. So that's when I created Electa Society. It was an executive level leadership organization that was going to be free to help teach students real world skills so that they can better serve others and become conscious leaders. And so I've been active, and this is one of the presentations. So in kind of summary, went to college, was president of student government, got a lot of leadership awards because I followed my mentor's advice, worked in government, 12 years at NSLS. I managed over 40 employees and over 600 interns. Now I'm the founder of Duffy Leadership Incorporated, which is my speaking business, and Electa Society, which is my nonprofit, which is my passion and what I would love to spend all my time doing. And some of these pictures on the right side, you might recognize some of these celebrity and famous faces, because when I was working at NSLS, I was part of the speaker broadcast. So I would actually try to recruit the best speakers, authors around the country to try to teach students about success and leadership. And so even though those are some of the people that I've met, and I'm very grateful for that, here's why I'm grateful to NSLS. And it's going to transition to why I'm in this presentation and teaching all of you about this today. When I was in NSLS, they said, we want to be the next Google. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so we had consultants come in and teach us, what does the Fortune 500 companies do to hire the best talent and people? So there's a training method called the A+ method of training. There's even a book that I'll even mention at the end of this presentation, or about midway, where we got this. I read the book, we went to the 2-day training, and guess what? Some of these ideas and concepts I'm going to be including in this presentation today. And so I was responsible for all the interviews, because they wanted to have somebody from the company. We were a small company growing into a medium-sized company, meaning like 10 employees to 50 to 100 employees. So I was so grateful for that experience. So when I'm going to be speaking to you, guess what? I'm speaking with 2 hats. One, being a manager, knowing how to manage people and lead teams, a breakthrough in revenue and goals and achieving our goals, and the HR role, right? Where I had to hire people, I had to interview people, hundreds of people all the time, even all those interns, those 600 interns, I had to interview them all. So again, that's where I'm speaking from this experience to help all of you succeed in not only applying for a job, but also keeping your job. So let's jump into applying for your job. So there are 11 principles that I want to teach you on how to apply for a job. So the first one is know thyself. This is an image from the famous movie, The Matrix, and Neo meets the Oracle. And then on the sign above the door says, in Latin, like know thyself, right? And so what ends up happening is when you're applying for a job, you need to know what your skills and talents are, what your abilities, what strengths that you have, and where do you want to spend your time? Who are the people that you want to serve? And it's also very important that you put your best foot forward because you have to recognize, well, what are my accomplishments? What do I have achieved? Because those are the things that are going to make a big difference. One of the first questions that they're going to even ask you when you're even applying for a job is, tell me about yourself, right? What do I say? Do I say where I was born, my height? Like, what do I talk about? It's like, no, they want to hear your story, your elevator pitch of who are you? What are your skills and talents and abilities? What have you done? And what have you accomplished? And why are you here? What do you hope to gain by being at this job or working for this company? So just having that mindset of asking yourself those questions and writing out the answers is going to really help you. So right now we could also take some time to actually just write these out, but there's another exercise that I want you guys to do that's I think is even more important. And we're going to do this right now because to me, a presentation it could be fun and it can be entertaining and things like that. But what I really want you to do is I really want this to be a workshop. I want you to actually apply these skills. So the next slide, I have an exercise for you that I really want you to all do. There are 17 qualities or skills that in general, there may be more, they probably have different synonyms and stuff like that, but these are the basic fundamental ones that all kind of companies, nonprofits are looking for. Do you have any of these skills and qualities? And now you might say you might have them, but here's my question to you. How would you rate yourself on that skill or quality on a 0 to 10? So what we're going to do is we're going to take about 3 minutes and I want you to write down each one of these qualities. And then next to it, I want you to write your score, right? How would you rate yourself? 0 being poor, 10 being excellent. Now let's go over some of these in case you might not know. Enthusiasm, energy. Okay, that's kind of obvious. Resourcefulness. One student said, Tim, what do you mean by that resourceful? Well, if I'm hiring you for a company, I want you, how much do you need hand holding, right? How much do you need to say, I don't know what to do, please tell me, right? That would say that you're not that resourceful. However, if you are resourceful, if somebody asks you to do something, you're like, oh, I could do this, or I can ask this person, or I can talk to this person. That's what you mean by examples where you maybe had limited directions and you called upon resources that person didn't even tell you and you were able to get it done, because that makes an employer much happier, right? Less time to train you and develop you, and you can be self-sufficient. That's great. Goal oriented, right? Where you have a goal, you achieve a goal. Competitiveness, a lot of employees, like, they have goals, quarterly goals, monthly goals. Do you play in sports or anything like that? Some of the best people that I've ever hired for my teams are sports individuals. Why? Because they love to work as a team to accomplish a goal, and that's really beneficial. Responsible or reliable. Can I count on you that you say and you do what you're going to do and you see it through? Team member, right? Working well with people. Work ethic, like you're disciplined, like you can keep getting stuff done, right? You don't stop until it's done. Perseverant tenacity is a little similar, where it's like, hey, if you have an obstacle in front of you, how do you overcome that obstacle? Well, some people just say, I give up. I can't do it. It's too difficult. There's an obstacle. Well, employers want you to have tenacity. They want you to persevere. That means if there's an obstacle, there's a way above it, there's a way underneath it, there's a way around it, maybe right through it. So that's the kind of thing that they're looking for. And then quality oriented, right? So how many times when you put something together, do you want it to be perfect, right? To making sure that there's no errors, no mistakes, and things like that, that you love ideal, like high standard quality. Analyze, solve problems, create and develop something, teach and train, motivate, implement, administer or manage. Okay, like you had to manage a team, manage a project, sell or promote, and communicate effectively. Okay, so right now we're going to take maybe 3 minutes. Again, if you've already done this exercise and you completed it and you've already written down all these things and scored it, just write in the chat done so that I can know if most of the people, if you need more time. All right, so I'm going to put on my timer. Let's do it right now. Rate yourself on these 17 skills. Go. And also, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Also, because we have about 15 people, you have the ability to also unmute yourself, or you can also raise your digital hand as well. Okay. Thank you, Caitlin, Dorothea, Bryant. You guys are all finished. Great job. I'll just give another 30 seconds. Now, for those of you who are wrapping up, or those who have already finished, here's the next exercise that I would recommend, but we don't have time in the presentation for us to do it today. But once you've actually rated yourself on these skills, the next thing for you to do, and make this as a homework assignment, can you actually provide an example or examples of when you actually demonstrated that skill? Because guess what a job interview is? All right, we're looking for somebody to sell and promote merchandise. Can you give me an example of where you've done that? So then you have to be able to say, hey, yes, I'm actually very good at selling and promoting. Let me give you an example. We had an event and I had to promote it, and I had to get people in their seats to attend this event. And we anticipated only 30, but because of my outreach and I was able to sell and persuade people to come to this event, well, guess what? We had over 100 people attend. So do you see, taking the time to come up with as many examples of each one of these is going to make you more successful in your job interview, etc. All right. Well, let's keep going for the sake of the presentation. The next slide is, or next principle is research the organization and position for you're applying for. You can't just go in blind applying for a job and say, I've never looked up this company. I don't know what the heck that they do. I just know that it's a job and I want it. It's not enough. You need some background, some information to know, what does this company do? All right. What are their customers? When I have researched for jobs, I would actually take I would probably dedicate at least 1 hour. I mean, that's for me because I can be pretty quick researching the company, looking at their website, reading their products. I'll probably take notes, because you rewriting what they do, how they sell, what they're trying, who are they serving is going to help you. And the second resource that you can use beyond their website and learning about them is I like really using Glassdoor, because in preparation for the interview, Glassdoor provides you sometimes what their salary requirements are. They provide you background on the organization. They actually tell you what kind of questions that they ask during interviews. It's great, so that you can kind of be prepared. What are the reviews from the employees or former employees? Hey, just note there's some bitter employees out there, so sometimes they might just write some negative reviews. So take it with a grain of salt, right? Every management company, every management team at every company can always do better and things like that. Okay, so that's just a little bit about that research. Now, you found the perfect job. You found the perfect internship. Now what? Now you actually have to submit and apply and submit your resume. But here's where the mistake that most people do. They think that because in my job, I have a resume and I did certain things at that job, that I can use that same resume for all these different companies. No, 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 no. That's not what you're supposed to do. And that's why you never get any callbacks or things like that. Right now, they want to say is the job description is the answer key to the test. Okay. They now have systems, automatic tracking systems like ATS, where applicant tracking systems, where they basically put in your resume and they say, how many keywords does this person match to what the job description has? And so whether we should even take the time to interview them. So your job is not lie, but take what they have as their requirements and then see, do I have anything on my job description that I have demonstrated those skills? So for me, what I like to do is when I have my resume, I have my position, I have like my accomplishments at the top, like I achieved this goal, I achieved this thing, because those are important to know you're an A player, that you actually get stuff done. You don't just do the bare minimum, but you have those accomplishments. But then in terms of the duties, you try to see, hey, do any of the duties on this job description match, then copy and paste and put it into your resume. That's going to increase your chance of actually getting that job or getting that interview. So the next one, mocking. Practice interviewing with somebody. Now go to career service, go use your mother, use your brother-in-law. I don't care who you have. You actually have to practice out loud pretending that this person is interviewing you. Now you may say, well, Tim, what kind of questions they're going to ask? I'm so glad you asked them. Well, guess what? At the end of this presentation, when you fill out this post-assessment, I'm going to give you the 49 most common interview questions that you could be asked during any interview. All right. If you review that and how to respond to those things. So if you read that and apply that, well, guess what? You're going to be set up for success. But if you're like, Tim, that's 49 questions. That's a lot to memorize. Well, why don't I give you the cheat sheet right now? Most common questions that are going to be asked during the interview are the following. Okay, you worked at this place or worked at this. Who was your boss? Okay, when did you work there? What did you actually do? Right? Because they need to know what your role was at that company. So know your boss. What was your role? What were your biggest accomplishments? What were your biggest failures or learning lessons? Okay, and why did you leave? Right? Those are the most common questions. Maybe in bonus might be, tell me more about yourself, right? To kind of give you an overview of the history. But sometimes screening interviews are the first interview before you do usually in-depth interviews, depending whether you're applying for an entry level or a much more advanced level. They only have 30 minutes. So those are the kind of the basic questions, but it's nice to know and be prepared for all the other types of questions that they might ask you. Any other questions might be, okay, this job requires these skills. Can you give examples where you've demonstrated those skills? That's the job interview, right? And if you have already got an interview, like you're already a step ahead of the game because it means that you already met the qualifications. The job interview is really about, do I like you? Can I work with you? Can I see myself working with you? Would you fit in part of this culture? So that's why going back to mocking and practicing, if you're nervous, that's going to show up in the interview. So for example, if I asked you, what was your name? You're like, oh, my name is Tim. Like, it's so easy. Well, that's because you've practiced so many times people asking your name and saying it. But if someone has say, tell me the greatest strength of where you demonstrated skills in selling, you're like, let me think, you haven't actually practiced with somebody telling you and asking you those questions. And so the more that you do that, the much more comfortable you feel. I'll tell you one quick story. My wife is a veterinary technician, okay? She works at an animal hospital here in New York City, but before she worked at a local hospital here on Long Island, New York. And she was tired, ready to leave her job. And I'm like, apply for different jobs. And I helped her. She's like, I'm not qualified for that job. I'm like, no, you have some experience. You mention what you do have and see if you can get it. Well, guess what? They called her for an interview. Amazing. It was in cancer and oncology. She didn't have as much experience, but she had a little. So guess what happened? Did the interview. Well, here was the best part. Even though that they didn't at the interview, they say, well, you don't have much experience in the oncology that we want, but we'll keep your resume in mind. And guess what happened? She ended up getting a job 6 months later at that animal hospital because they had interviewed her, liked her, and found another position for her. So again, that's an important lesson. And then the second important lesson that I want to share with you about my wife is she actually applied to the Bronx Zoo once. And this was before she got that other job. And I'm like, okay, let's help prepare you and mock and prepare for the meeting. And so guess what happened? I'm mocking with my wife. I'm like, okay, so can you please tell me about your greatest strengths and, greatest accomplishments? And I'm going through all these questions, going through my 49 questions. And guess what she says? After 15 minutes, she's like, stop, Tim, stop. They're not going to ask me these questions. These are ridiculous questions. I'm a veterinary technician. They're going to ask me about roles about my job as a veterinary technician. So you're making me nervous. I don't want to practice anymore. I'm like, okay, your life, whatever. Guess what happened? She goes to the Bronx Zoo, and guess what they do? They start asking her all the questions that I had helped train her to ask. And then she's kicking herself in the butt. She's like, why didn't I finish all the questions that Tim wanted me to practice mocking with? So again, I tell you these stories because it happens, right? It's better that you be prepared and know all the questions that they might ask you so you feel comfortable and confident in answering them than wishing and hoping and praying that everything's going to work out. It's all about you developing that confidence. So that's what I really want for you. So the next thing, and this is an important discussion point because we're here doing this presentation about Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Identifying your culture, representing who you are, being authentic. So the big question always comes up in job interviews, well, how should I dress? How should I do my hair? Should I shave my facial hair off? What is the appropriate clothing, right? So I chose these three Latinos over here because I wanted to get your guys' feedback, right? And again, I'm not here to tell you right or wrong, but before I share my thoughts and opinions, I like to hear from the audience. So again, feel free to raise your digital hand. Tell me, what do you think? Are these individuals in general dressed appropriately? In terms of how they put themselves together as a professional for applying for a job. So again, please, I'd like to get feedback from the group. So is there anybody else that would like to share their opinion on what do you think? And again, there's nothing right or wrong, just what your perspective. Like for example, the first picture, should she has her hair out, right, with these big hoop earrings. Should she pull it back? What should she do? Again, the second picture, should that person shave his facial hair? Is the third picture too sexual, like in terms of more revealing? Should she wear something more traditional or old fashioned? So who'd like to share their thoughts or opinions? There's no right or wrong answer. Don't be shy now. I'll wait for the awkward pause. Mm. So Kaylee, okay, all right. I'm starting to see the comments. All right, great. I'll read these out. So Brian says no denim. Okay, understood, right? Maybe not the professional thing to do, right? Sometimes depend on the job that they're applying for. Exactly, Kaylee. So what would be some examples, Kaylee, of jobs where this might be appropriate or not appropriate? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You could either put in the chat or unmute yourself. The third lady is a bit too forward, right? Right? I like how you put that, Brian, and just a little extra form. Well, if you have any other comments, I'd love to hear them. Post them in the chat. Let me actually give you my thoughts now on what I think. Maybe a lingerie model. Yeah, absolutely. If she's applying for a job as a lingerie model, her outfit is perfect, right? So absolutely, it all depends. So I'm going to tell you a couple of different stories of my experience. So for me, in terms of the first picture, I do think that you should represent yourself authentically and things like that. I think it also you have to research the company, right? And even when before you're doing maybe a screening interview by phone, before you do it in person, you can ask them, hey, what's the dress code? What's the culture like? In terms of professional attire to wear to the interview. I just want to understand a little bit more about your culture. I actually applied to, at one point in my career, different jobs, especially in the tech sector. And so to me, I'm a person that has always been trained to wear business casual. So again, you notice me in this presentation, I'm wearing a button-down shirt, right? I'm not wearing a tie, so it's not super, super professional, but this is how I want to present myself. I went to these interviews with these techs, digital, platforms, e-commerce, Silicon Valley. Guess what happened? All of them were wearing t-shirts. They looked like they just woke up out of bed. It was just so shocking to me, coming from, working in white collar jobs. But for example, for this individual, should she put her hair up? No, it's not me to actually tell her how she would like to put her hair. However, my litmus test is it a distraction for the interviewer that's interviewing you? So to me, I'm so used to seeing hair like that. That's kind of very beautiful hair. I wouldn't mind. Some people would say, I prefer to pull my hair back. And then once I'm hired, I can let my hair down. I would say for me, if I'm interviewing and I respect all different cultures, guess what? Those hoop earrings, the moment she's talking and they're jiggling, guess what? They're distracting me as the interviewer. And anything that you to do to distract me is I'm not paying attention or focusing on what you're trying to say. So that's my just advice through the HR lenses. Don't distract me. Again, with the facial hair, listen, you have to be you on how you want to represent yourself in a company. And usually for me, it's perfectly fine if person has facial hair. I even have facial hair, and I've gone to job interviews like this, but I'm going to give you different perspectives. My brother works at FedEx, right? Big company. The culture of that company is military background. So the CEO was in the military, a lot of these executives. So when you go into the military, what do? Short hair, clean shaven. And so I was having a conversation with my brother, and he was saying, he was talking to one of his team members, and they want to be promoted. And he's like, yeah, I want to be promoted. And he's like, well, can you look at all the C-suite executives? Can you see a pattern? Do any of them have facial hair? And he's like, no, none of them do. He's like, yes, because this is the culture, right? Some companies have fear, and they have to know who are you selling to. If they think that your facial hair is going to be distraction or it's going to lose business, then guess what? My brother would say, hey, if you want to get promoted, be and look like the culture to fit in, so that they can feel comfortable and that they can send you to Coca-Cola or $1 million contract deals, and that they're not going to say, oh, I don't like him. He wasn't, clean shaven. He didn't look like he know how to present himself. So again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm giving you different perspectives, right? Let me just read some more of the comments. Okay. The gentleman needed a cleaner shave. Okay, understood. Dress more professionally, because once they get a job, they need to be prepared for the work environment. Dorothea, thank you so much. Caitlin said makeup and jewelry should be minimal, natural. I agree. It goes back to that whole concept. Is your jewelry distracting me that I can't focus on what you're saying? The third should add a dark jacket, okay, to take away the tension from the middle area. I remember a one interview that a woman came in and she wore a black shirt. So she was covered up, but guess what? The black was so thinly veiled that you could see her entire cleavage. And as a guy, I'm trying to be professional. I'm like, don't look, Tim, like, don't distract. Again, I'm too busy focusing on being professional, and your dress is distracting me, even though you think that it looks professional. It's not, even though that it's transparent. But like I said, this third person, yes, to me, depending if it's a white collar job, this might not be appropriate. But if she was applying for a boutique, a fashion boutique, or applying for that job, that might be perfectly appropriate. A bartender, whatever it may be, know the position of what you're applying for. So I'm just going to give you what the extreme version of the conservative, or I like to call it old fashioned, because when people think of conservative, they think of politics. I'm just much more of like a reserve, a more traditional workplace. So again, these are just general tips that I just felt obligated to share with you. If it's a very, very formal, for women, tend to wear solid color formal suit, a coordinated blouse, moderate shoes, nothing like super high or sexy to distract. Limited jewelry, like we talked about, neat and professional, tan or light hosiery, sparse makeup or perfume. Oh my goodness, I have to comment about this. Whether it's men, women, anybody, please stop the aftershave, stop the perfumes. I'm a person who's really sensitive to smells. So if you put on so much perfume, again, distractions. You're distracting me from actually listening to the content of what you're saying, and I'm too busy worried about other things. Manicure, nails, portfolio, briefcase. Again, for traditional old-fashioned cultural workplace, men tend to wear solid color formal suits. Again, if it's business casual, just go without a tie, solid color, nothing to distract, dark socks. Again, you can wear a watch or whatever you want to do. Neat professional hairstyle, easy on the aftershave. Again, neatly trimmed nails. And again, for those who don't identify as men, women, whatever, again, identify, wear what you think is culturally appropriate for what you most identify with. Okay. I just want to be as inclusive as possible. But again, I wanted to share with you what the old fashioned traditional, and I just wanted to let you know that as we're moving forward, much more acceptance is happening now, where actually even some states, my friend works at a law firm, and certain states are starting to pass laws that you can't actually discriminate based on individual clothing. For example, Muslim garbs, or things like that, that you can't say, you can't require them to change their dress code. So again, I think that we're becoming more inclusive as a culture. There may be also some backlash, but again, research the environment, the job, so that you know and prepared what you're looking for. Okay. So next thing, bring up backup documentation. Why do I say this? Now, you would think that most interviews, you've submitted their resume, you're now they want an in-person resume. Well, guess what? I had managers that would have your resume and they would go to the front lobby area and ask you, hey, do you have a copy of your resume? Even though they could print them up. Why? Because she was testing them. How prepared are you? Did you actually think ahead? So that's one reason why they might ask you for documentation. The other might be just time savings. It's kind of disappointing, but because we're living in a culture of now everything's last minute, guess what? You may actually have submitted your resume, done a screener interview, going for an in-person interview, right? Or it could be via Zoom meeting. They may not have even had a chance to look at your resume. That's shocking. Like you spent all this time reviewing it. Maybe HR did pass you on, but the person who's doing the in-person interview or the in-depth, 1 hour interview, they haven't even looked at it or they skimmed it. So again, one of the things that I've seen in my experience in HR is they haven't had time to print up their resume. So they might just ask you, hey, do you have a copy of your resume? Sure. Have it ready to go, right? Speed up the process to have those backup documentations. All right. Then the last thing is visualize a successful interview. Right now, mindfulness is something that's becoming very, very big in our culture, and they're starting to recognize the importance of meditation. I'm a strong advocate of meditating, 1 to 3 times a day for a minimum for 5 minutes. Why? Because if you, take a bath to be clean every day so that you don't stink, well, guess what? You need to take a mind bath every day so your brain doesn't stink, right? With all these negative emotions and thoughts of worries, fears, and anxieties, you need to cleanse your mind, okay? And so that kind of really helps you right before an interview or anything like that, or any kind of major meeting. Practice deep breathing, right? That's another form of cleansing to blow out all the anxiety. Imagine a successful interview. This calm state of presence is going to actually help you increase the likelihood of you get that interview. I have talked with presidents of companies, and guess what happens? They said that within the first minute to 2 minutes, they'll know whether you're the right person for the job. Can you believe that? They know within a couple minutes. Why? It's because their confidence, their energy, the way that they carry themselves, the way that they greet, the way that they smile, the way they feel relaxed. It's like, oh, this person feels welcoming and inviting. They're vibrating at a frequency of love, empathy, compassion, peace, calm. Well, guess what? People are going to be attracted to that. So the more that you can release that anxiety, imagine a successful interview, you're going to be more successful. So right now, what I want to do is there's a friend of mine, Nando Rodriguez, who's a breakthrough coach, and he's great. And we did a training right now. This is kind of called Secrets to Getting Your Dream Job or Internship. We're covering the majority of what we covered in that presentation, in this presentation, along with some other stuff on how to keep your job. So I just love to share you this 10-minute, of this approximately 10-minute clip of what his advice to you on when it comes to applying jobs and learning about LinkedIn and social media. Okay, so let's take a couple minutes to watch that and learn from that. And I hope you enjoy it, because Nando was also a recruiter. So his job was to find people to fill those positions. So let's just see what insight he has. Okay, let's go.
Everybody, my name is Nando Rodriguez, and I am a breakthrough coach. And currently what I do is I work with entrepreneurs who experience imposter syndrome and help them conquer that whole world of self-sabotage, procrastination, perfectionism, self-doubt, negative self-talk, all of that, right? And the reason that Tim reached out to me is prior to me being a coach, about 5 years ago, I was working in PR and media as a recruiter, and then eventually as the head of employment branding. So always inside HR, always inside of recruitment, interviewing candidates. And then eventually, as the head of employer branding, I was creating content for candidates to make decisions on, oh, that's where I want to work. Look how awesome, the virtual tour looks. Or, oh, they just created this video with the head of, programming. And I was the one behind the scenes, producing, writing, and creating those videos, right? So I just wanted to share with you all, my knowledge, my information, and help you and be of service, right? And so, Tim, if you can go on to the next one. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn, as a recruiter, as an ex-recruiter, LinkedIn was the place that we would go to, right? And look for candidates. The second place would be our internal database. Now, you would think our internal database would be the first place. It just wasn't. Mm-hmm. And when you speak to other recruiters, it's still LinkedIn, right? So you want to make sure that when you apply to jobs, and this is where it gets kind of dicey, right? Because you apply for a job and you want to match what that job is, but eventually you're going to have a LinkedIn profile, and that you want to keep pretty, neutral or industry savvy. So if you're into media PR, you want to make that LinkedIn profile, juicy and tantalizing for people in the media PR business. But if you're into finance and, Goldman Sachs, the financial district, then you want to keep it true to who you are, right? And here's what we do as a recruiter. I'll give you like a little BTS behind the scenes is, and Tim was absolutely right on matching the key phrases of your resume and cover letter to the job description. What we do is, we come in, the hiring manager says, hey, I have a new position. Here's the job description. We as recruiters take a look at the job description and we see, I'll use social media as an example. Because that's what I used to do. Is I used to recruit for the social media division for Ogilvy and Mather. Is, oh, I'm looking for somebody to run the beverage account Corona, and I want them to be a community manager. So they have to have had community management experience at least 2 to 3 years, and a beverage company would be a plus. But what I really need them to do is social engagement, really need them to be on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So all I'm going to do, it's not rocket science, is go to LinkedIn and type in social media community manager, comma, Twitter, comma, Facebook, comma, community manager, enter. And then if your keywords match, you're going to be in my queue. So I'm just going to go through all these profiles. If I were to go through our ATS, which is the applicant tracker system, which each company has, same thing. I go in there and I type in social media, comma, Twitter, comma, Facebook, comma, community manager, and then see what comes up. So that's why it's super important to match those key phrases, because that's what we use to find you, all right? So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about on LinkedIn. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about is actually, if you're on other social media platforms and they're public, and you're going through, okay, I'm gonna apply for a job or an internship, you wanna go through and you wanna clean up your platforms. And what I mean by that is, we as recruiters, hiring managers, we're gonna go looking through your social. We wanna get to know who you are when you're not at work, because there's sometimes a liability crossover. And so we will go and find you on Twitter. We'll go and find you on Instagram and get a feel for, will this person fit in culturally, right? Is this a culture fit? Will this person get along with the rest of the team? A lot of times you'll be surprised what people keep on their social, very political. And so if you are going to be on social platforms like Twitter, Instagram, go private. And then this way, companies are not legally allowed to ask you for your social media. Like, hey, could you reveal this to me? I need your password. They're not able to, they just don't do that. But if you're open they're going to go and they're going to look, and they might not see something, and they might see something they might not like. And that's probably why, they might end up canceling an interview, or you won't even get the interview in the first place. So just be cautious. And also, when you get the job, be cautious of what you're posting on social media, because it is a reflection. Even though you post on there, these are my opinions, this has nothing to do with, Ogilvy or what have you. It's become such a world that's meshed up with cancel culture that they don't want to be associated with you, and people lose their jobs because of social, right? So just something to keep in mind, not for you to be afraid or anything or keep away from doing social, but just for you to be cautious and be savvy about it, right? Let me see, what else about LinkedIn? There's an opportunity also on LinkedIn for you to, when you're applying for these jobs, something that I always encourage my friends and candidates to do is do research on your recruiter if you can. Look them up on LinkedIn, and then you do that thing. You look them up on Instagram, you look them up on Twitter, and just get a feel for them, so that when you're on that phone screen, right, you kind of get to know who they are, and they're not such a, who's the man behind the curtain situation. So you're not that nervous anymore. You're just like, oh, that's just Bob. He had a barbecue last week. Now, you don't want to mention it because, that's a little stalkerish, right? But you just want to get a feel for it. And I think you folks get that, right? I'm going to open it up right now. Like, is there anything that I've said so far that maybe you have a question on, or maybe you're curious about social media or LinkedIn?
Well, while they're thinking of any questions to ask you, Nando, I have a question. One of the things that I have shared a lot with the members of Electus Society is, and I'm just very transparent, I'm not really on social media. I have a Twitter account, I have a Facebook account, but I have an Instagram account, but I am not on it at all. I can't, occasionally when people see it, or they might say it, my wife might share something and she texts me, and that's the point I click on it and look at something on Instagram, but then I shut it off really quickly. When I see applying for different jobs, I do see that they want you to put in some different social media. Do you suggest for somebody like myself or other people who are not active to social media, even if I have an account, that I still post it? Does it raise a red flag if I don't include my social media?
I'll be honest with you, if you don't post it, it's like either the question comes up, does this person not have it at all? Or is this person avoiding the question, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. If you're not active, you're just not an active person. That's okay. So I would go ahead and put it in there, and they will see that. Like, oh, Tim's not an active person, but he has it. Okay, got it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It just takes away that insecurity that this guy is suspect, right? That
yes,
that he doesn't. I don't have anything that's controversial on my social media.
Okay. Yeah, and if anything, it could even be like reassuring, like, oh, okay, good. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not gonna, like me, for example. I'm on social 24/7, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm posting, business stuff, or I'm posting, client stuff. But if I were to get, for whatever reason, a company were to look me up, that's all they would see, because that's honestly all I post, mm-hmm. But they would know, like, okay, he's a poster. We get it, Again, there's nothing wrong if you're not active, but if you are active and you're posting, keg parties, things like that, go private, because they will go through it and be like, and it's not fair. I'll be honest with you, it's not fair, but they have to look at the liability.
No, I completely understand that. All right. So I hope you found that video clip of Nando as helpful as I did when I first, invited him to actually speak. Hold on. Let me escape out of this, and then let me go to the actual presentation one more time. All right, so let's keep going. The next principle is first impressions matter. Now, most meetings that are in person, one of the things that I really did when I was doing interviews was that I would show up to that job an hour before. But you're like, oh my goodness, do you actually show up right in their office waiting an hour for interview? No, that makes it awkward and very uncomfortable. That like this person's an hour early or half an hour early. You're not supposed to do that because now they have to worry about you, think about you, and things like that. What I recommend is if you're going to be in a job interview that's in person, what you do is you find out wherever that location is, find a local coffee shop, be there an hour before so that you have a buffer to make sure that nothing happens, so that you can basically walk into their offices 15 to 10 minutes before and then be there waiting. That's actually showing that you're on time and professional. The next thing is that most interviews now are very often virtual meetings. So how do you do it with virtual meetings? Well, I believe that you should get prepared and be ready to join that virtual meeting at least 5 minutes before. There's nothing worse to basically say, oh my goodness, let me open up my Zoom, let me get my calendar ready, and then suddenly Zoom crashes. You're like, oh my goodness. But what you really want to do is right before, when you're about to log on and hit that button, do it 2 minutes earlier, right? So even though the meeting hasn't started at 11 o'clock, just you're arriving at 10:58 so that you're ready to go, and it shows that you're on time, you're professional, and things like that. So again, those are just some general tips. Another principle is positive body and verbal language. So, for example, I love this little meme of 99 or 90% of all communication between two people is nonverbal, right? So again, just, avoid crossing your arms, avoid fidgeting, especially if you're on Zoom, your leg can shake and no one would notice. But again, tapping of your feet, these are all distractions. You can lean forward and so that you can be engaged. Now, sometimes people get obsessed with, oh, I said too many ums. I said, avoid trying to say so many ums. But like I said, if you would have mocked and practiced before, you're going to have much less ums. Ums are a part of natural language when people are trying to think of what to say. It's just a matter of you're going to have a lot more ums if you haven't mocked and practiced. And please stop trying to impress them with big vocabulary. It's not necessary. You're not trying to impress them of, ooh, how smart you are. They just want you to be your authentic self, be friendly, be courteous, and that understand people, right? And can I get with them? Do they have a good energy? We already know that they're qualified. Could I potentially work with imagine working them day to day? So those are the things to focus on. Another principle is always send a thank you letter or email. Now, some people say, if you go to these trainings of other careers, they're like, mail in a postcard, because if you mail in a postcard, it shows that you're unique and different and that you took the time. I'm like, oh my goodness, like we're involved, right? Email is now the main form of communication. I've done interviews and said, no, we're not going to move this forward with this candidate. And then 3 days later, I get a letter in the mail thanking me for that email. I'm like, oh gosh, I just passed them. It'd be much more professional if you could just send a thank you email, and it could be 1 or 2 lines. Hey, dear Tim, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the meeting. I really enjoyed talking with you. I look forward to the next steps in the interview process. Appreciate your time. Bye-bye. Like that's it. It's so simple. Like, and if you do it right away, like that kind of blows people off. Like, wow, this person's on top of it. They're very courteous. So again, I'm happy to get emails and stuff like that right away. And then the last part is evaluate the interview, right? You may not get every different job that you apply to, but every interview is a learning opportunity to say, okay, what did I do well? How did I answer that? What could I have done differently? And you start to pick up what things that people are looking for. Like, for example, when I was doing a lot of job interviews, I had all my preparation, and then they started asking me questions that I'm like, ooh, I didn't know that I hit my goals, but you're actually learning about how much money did I make in terms of revenue, and you're looking for specific numbers. And I'm like, ooh, I didn't have that off the top of my head. So it's like, okay, next time I have that, I have to do those calculations and figure out how much revenue that I actually brought into the company. So again, you start to pick up what they're really looking for. There's a big analogy that applying for jobs is kind of like dating, right? They have their list of everything that they're looking for. So the question is, do you have everything on that list? Okay, and so that's what you're trying to do. So remember how I said that I was trained in top grading, which is what Fortune 500 companies use to help train and um, develop people so that they can hire the best of the best. Well, that company of A+ method of training was created by Geoff Smart and Randy Street, right? And they wrote this book, Who. It's the #1 business problem that people have. They think it's like, oh no, we need to do a better job training people. It's like, no, this turns that all on its head. It's actually the people that you hire. And so what this book is about, if you found that this is presentation, you're like, Tim, these are all general principles. I really already know about this stuff. This is nice repetition. But if you want to do a deep dive in like much more advanced in terms of job interviewing and things like that, you can read this book. And here are some other tips. You can hire a resume editor, right? You can send them the job description, your resume. You can hire a professional to proofread it. The thing that's frustrating whenever you give a resume to multiple people is everybody will actually give you multiple edits. And some people will give you this opinion and other people will give you this opinion. I'm going to speak from my own personal experience. I hired a professional resume editor, and guess what? He made my resume look really pretty. He had a summary, he put it in a nice blue box. He had a different font. And then underneath, so I could say that it looked aesthetically appealing, but here's the problem. It was all different formats and fonts. And whenever I uploaded my resume to some things, like businesses wouldn't know how to read my resume. They would get it all off and mixed up. So sometimes the simplest resume is the best resume, something that's easily scanned and uploaded into the system. So again, in an ATS, again, if you want to go above and beyond, but for example, I've done it and I've looked at it, and to me, it looked exactly the same as when I did a resume. But you have to try different things, and I think it's much more important that you at least customize it to match the job description. That is almost like the ATS optimized resume. If you have the funds and the money to do it, okay, go ahead, you can try it, and just look on Google reviews and who does it. I think mine was like $100 or something like that at the time. That was a couple of years ago. All right, so in summary, what did we talk about for part 2 for applying for a job? Know thyself, know the organization that you're applying for, match the job description with your cover letter and resume. Some require cover letters, other doesn't. Cover letters are supposed to be almost like the job interview, right? It's supposed to be, hey, here's what I've done, here's what I've accomplished. Now I've gone different opinions about cover letters. What I basically do right now for cover letters is just my personal opinion. People don't have time to read anymore. So I basically have the introductory sentence that I'm applying. Thanks so much. I'm applying for this position. Here are some of my accomplishments. And then I just put bullet points and I said, thank you. I look forward to the interview, so that they could just kind of read the summary. If it's matched to what they're looking for, hey, bullet points right to the point. That's how I do it. But again, people will give you different perspectives. Prepare and mock. Look professional. Don't stink with perfumes and things like that. Don't distract. Bring up backup documentation for an in-person interview. Visualize, right? Meditate, breathe, calm your mind. Imagine a successful interview. Positive body and verbal language. Send thank you letters or emails, and evaluate the interview. So now we come to the final part of this presentation, which is all about keeping your job, right? So again, there's could be a lot more that we could have talked about this in terms of keeping your job, getting promoted at your job. But I think it's a very important to answer this question. If I was a manager, what do I wish all my employees knew so that they could be successful? So that's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing, I have to get a little vulnerable with all of you, right? Because I'm a pretty much an open book. I want to share with you all my professional mistakes that I made throughout my almost 2 decades of work experience. And so here's what they are. And maybe in my sharing, you can kind of see yourself. The first one was, I was a social butterfly. Okay. I love people. I love talking to people. I was working at a company at NSLS, and they said, we want a great positive culture where people feel bonded and connected. So to me, that gave me a green light to say, okay, you need to start talking with people and becoming friends with people. But guess what happened? I spent hours each day talking and connecting with people. And by the time I sat back at my desk, I'm like, oh my goodness, several hours have passed and I haven't done anything of what I needed to do for my work, right? So again, if you are to get ahead and be very successful at your job, you have to reprioritize. You have to get your job done first, and that the reward of accomplishing what you need to do, then you can have downtime to actually talk and connect with other employees. The second mistake that I made was I came like I was obsessed, right? I got all these emails. Oh, we have to answer all the emails. I want to look good. I want to answer everything. Oh my goodness, there are so many emails that are going to fly at you working for a company. And guess what? 80% of it is garbage. Again, I made up that number, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Most of it you may not need, or it's much lower priority. So I would spend time reading the emails, getting distracted, writing back to emails. Oh, this department says, hey, we would love employees to give their input on this survey or give your comments on this clothing. I'm like, oh, they're asking for my help. My job is to help them. And I'm so busy trying to help other people that I'm not focusing on my job and what I need to get done, right? And so a good kind of practice is what I had when I was working at my company or NSLS would be, don't answer emails right away. Okay. Use the first 2 hours of the day to get accomplished the most important things. Then I would look at my email at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, or whatever it may be. So I time the days I'm looking at my email, or right before I had a 10 o'clock meeting, I'd work on what I need to do was most important. And then if 5 minutes before the meeting, I check my email, skim really quickly. Is there anything urgent that I needed to know right before I go into this meeting? So I don't feel as if I've been left out or, oh, I didn't see that email. So again, you start to learn some best practices and habits. The third mistake that I made is I was a perfectionist. And by being a perfectionist, guess what I did? I actually saw where everybody else was not perfect. And so I became the unsolicited helper. Oh, let me help you with this. Let me help you with this. And I was really annoying people. Who asked you for your opinion? But I'm like, I'm committed to helping people. It's like, no, and I thought that the culture of my company was like, oh yeah, we're all teamwork out together. It's like, no, when you get into the real world, it's like, okay, you have to get your job done first before you start helping. And it was kind of shocking because at one point I had one employee ask me, Tim, you love commenting and all the things. What do you do all day? Because you're always responding to other people's stuff and work and contributing. And I'm like, oh man, that was kind of like a shock to me. It was true. I was spending too much time trying to help others instead of focusing on my job. Number 4, I was a workaholic martyr. So be careful of people who say, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so busy. Everyone's busy. I don't know anybody who's not. And so there's a famous line that if you want a job done right, you have to give it to a busy person. And so this is something that I really learned from my mentors. And they said, oh, I'm too busy. I don't have time to do that. It's like, no, that's actually not true. You always have time to accomplish what's important to you. And so if you are working for a manager and there's only 8 hours in a day and you're working on an important project and they say, hey, Tim, this is an important thing. I need you to get done. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, can you do it? There's a tendency for you to say, got it, boss. I'll do it exactly what you need to do done. But you're like, oh my goodness, but I have deadlines on this and I have finished. They're asking me, how do I tell them that I don't have the time or commitment? What you have to do, if you're a very effective employee, you say, thanks, boss. I'm happy to do it. I just have a quick question. I'm currently working on X, Y, and Z with these deadlines. What you've already asked me to do. Do you want me to reprioritize and do what you want me to do now first and push those to the side? I just want to know what is the most important aspect that you want me to focus on. If they're a mean boss, if they're impatient or high stress and they say, just get it done, I don't care. Again, now's not maybe the best time, right? But most bosses, managers would say, oh yeah, what you're doing, that's way more important than this that I'm asking you. So as soon as you're finished doing this, then you can work on that. Okay, I got it. So now you're a high functioning employee saying, I'm not going to tell them that I'm overwhelmed or whatever. I'm going to just work. I'm going to do my job and I'm going to focus on the most important things. But I was too busy socializing. Then I was working and then I was staying late to see, and my bosses were saying, oh my goodness, look at Tim, he's staying late to work, he's such a great workaholic. It's like, no, I was doing that for my own ego and to show them how awesome I was. But in reality, what I'm more impressed with are people who can get their job done and leave on time, right? And find a way to not become overwhelmed and stressed out, because again, they're just doing that for attention, or they just have bad time management skills. All right, we have a separate training just for that. All right, last two, judgmental. Because I'm a perfectionist, that meant I was really overcritical of other people, and that's very dangerous. So because I'm trying to be perfect all the time, guess what? Whenever I saw a mistake, I always told people, hey, why did you mess up? I was always assuming that people were screwing up. How come this mistake happened? You should have prevented this. I was judging them, and that's wrong to do. And I remember having a mentor tell me, like, Tim, guess what? People are doing the best job that they can for their role within that time. So instead of you jumping to conclusion that somebody screwed up, because that was the lens how I was viewing the world, right? And so it was distorting my reality. He said, first seek to understand, then be understood. So why don't you actually find out what happened? Be empathetic, right? And just know that mistakes happen. You may think that you're assuming that they screw up. Maybe they didn't. Maybe there's something else that happened. You don't know the whole story, so don't act like you're super self-righteous and judgmental. And then the last thing is inappropriate jokes. Now, again, when I worked for NSLS, we were all young professionals. We just got out of college. We cared about leadership development. It was almost like a collegiate atmosphere where people would crack jokes and you tease each other. And The Office, which I have a couple of memes in this presentation, where it was a big popular show. So whenever one would say something, they're like, oh my goodness, that's what she said, which was a very popular, joke, right? That could be very sexual innuendos. Now, we all thought it was funny. Now, in hindsight, guess what? I never got really any kind of complaints that said, Tim, you said sexually inappropriate things, because I was joking around with different people. I was joking around with everybody. But guess what happened? When it came time to promotion, guess what I had in my evaluation? Tim, you're very funny and you're hilarious and people get along with you very well, but we're terrified. And I'm like, what? Yeah, we don't want to promote you as a manager because we're worried that you're going to say something so inappropriate that it's going to be damage for the company and someone's going to sue us or get mad. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that was crazy. And that was like a big shock to me. So what ended up happening, instead of being super jokey and friendly, I became super extreme and no jokes, right? And I was like miserable and I was like super professional Tim, and I'm not going to say anything. And I wasn't happy and I was miserable. You have to find that happy medium where you have to actually develop high trust with people and know who you can like tease with. And there's also a big difference between teasing each other at work or outside of work, right? And so, and you also have to be very careful, because even though I had coworkers that are almost like my best friends, BFFs, I could make a joke in front of them, and I did at one point, and somebody came up and was listening, like, oh my gosh, Tim, that was so mean and rude. And I'm like, no, we joke around like that. Like, you don't understand. Again, people are eavesdropping, people are listening to you. And again, be careful. We love to live in a society where we're all peaceful, we're all happy, we're all loving and supporting each other. But there's competitiveness in the environment. You could be canceled, like Nando says. You can say people can be easily offended. Like right now, we're experiencing a culture where people love judging other people and trying to be morally virtuous. And so if I can say that you're being morally bad or you said something inappropriate, instead of actually having a conversation with that person, they're too busy and too quick to complain to HR. And again, you'll get a written warning and could potentially be fired. So again, I'm sharing with you my mistakes. So again, always the advice is be professional. Have friends outside of work to tease and relax, and have very high trust and know who you can trust with. And even sometimes people, you think that you can tease them, all it takes is for one person to shift. Hey, I was teasing with them. I could joke with them like this, and I've been joking with them ever since. And then suddenly they have a bad day, and now they're completely offended by your joke. Now they're really pissed. Now they report it to the manager. So people are funny, okay? I see all of these in my current workplace now, Dorothy. Oh, absolutely. So if you could learn these lessons that I had to learn the hard way, then I'm saving you a lot of time and grief. Okay. So what is the job of a manager? Most people don't know. It's like, oh, this person's just a boss and to order you around. Like, no, there are a lot of things that managers do in order to be an effective boss. Here's what they are. Number one, they set expectations. They need to know what you need to do your job well. Now, some managers don't do that. Okay. Again, it's very important. The next thing that they do is they have accountability meetings. They say, okay, let's meet in 2 weeks from now, 1 week from now, 1 month from now. Some managers never even meet with their employees. They're like, come to me when you have problems. Otherwise, I don't want to hear from you. Hey, it depends. But a good manager, in my opinion, is doing check-in meetings on a week to or bi-weekly basis to say, hey, what's going on? What's happening? Because in those meetings, that's where the important stuff happens. It's my job as a manager to explain to you company decision, why things are happening so that you understand, allow for venting, to help mentor and train you, get feedback. And guess what? Here's what most people don't realize with managers. My job is to check in with my employee to say, are you going to hit your goals? How are you tracking? And then guess what? I then have to report to my senior managers and basically say, hey, are they on track? Can we predict the future? Because that's what managers really have to do. So again, that's very, very important. And I'm going to mention another point later on in this part of the presentation on expectations, which is a very, very important thing that I want to talk about. They also do evaluations. It's important to know how well you're doing and things like that, how you can prove whether they hire you, they fire you, they provide predictability to senior management, which is what I shared with you. So let's talk about the biggest myth about getting promoted. And I use the Office meme of Dwight Schrute. If you've never seen The Office, I highly recommend you see it. It's a very, very funny show. But guess what happens? Dwight Schrute is this super hard-working individual. He's one of the best salesperson at his company. And guess what? He's never promoted to manager, right? Years after years, he's just working, and always wanting to be the assistant manager. And then, he's always, his boss is always saying, no, you're not the assistant manager. You're the assistant to the manager, always keeping him down. Because here's something that's very, very important that all of you need to understand. If you have a myth that we've been taught that if you work really hard, you will get promoted or rewarded. That's not actually entirely true. Yes, you need to work hard, but if I'm a manager and you're working hard and you do your job, guess what you do? You're doing a great job. You're my predictable employee. I can always count on you to hit your goals. Great. I'm happy. Stay in that role forever. Help me hit my company goals, right? Keep in the same place. You do your job and I'll be happy on it. And how do I know about this? Is because I worked myself to death. I was working the equivalent of 2 to 3 jobs at NSLS because I kept pulling more stuff on myself. I can do it. My ego wanted to show them how awesome I was. And so I basically said I was going to do all this stuff. And guess what happened? I was burning the candlestick at both ends. I was suffering. I was stressed out. I was having to have meetings. I'm like, I only have a certain amount of time of the day. I have to not meet up with that person. And I started cutting corners. And it got to the point where I said, hey, boss, like, I'm suffering right here. I'm doing 2 jobs, the full-time roles and one-time role, and I'm just overwhelmed and I need help and I can't do it. They're like, okay, Tim, we appreciate you. Yes, let's cut back. Guess what happened the next month? I got employee of the month. Wait, what? I got employee of the month? I was working my butt all these other couple of months, and it's only when I complained to my manager, at the time that was the president of the company, that's when I get recognized. See, I thought that if I could just work hard, my results, they could see that I work hard, but no. Managers are too busy worried about themselves and the company and their jobs and their goals. So guess what? You have to be your own advocate. And the times that I said, I'm going to super pass the goals, like let's say the goal was, starting, let's say 30 chapters. And I'm like, I'm going to start 50, and they're like, awesome, Tim, you can do it. And guess what? I started 40 chapters. They're like, you didn't hit the 50. You said you were going to hit the 50. Well, that's what they were counting on. And so this was a very important lesson is they were disappointed in me, but I'm like, the goal was 30 and I surpassed it by 10 and you're disappointed. This leads to the next point. It's, the advice, the truth is what you really want to do to get ahead and keep your job is stop trying to use your ego to say how awesome you are. Just do what the management team and the leadership team expects of you. And don't say, oh, I'm going to be the best, I'm going to hit all the biggest goals. You're going to say, okay, listen, I'm going to work towards the goals. And then as you're tracking to their goals, you under promise and over deliver. You're like, listen, you know what? I want to be conservative with my estimates. I want to be able to hit those goals. And this is where I'm tracking. And even though as you get closer and closer, the more you become sure of hitting those goals, then you say, guess what, boss? I'm going to actually exceed the goal. They're like, woohoo, that's so amazing. That's what you do, is you change their expectations. So this is something that is in everywhere in life. If I was to go give you an example of dating, and if you meet this perfect partner, like, I imagine that we're going to spend on the weekends going out, going to the beach, going on hikes. In your mind, that's the expectation of what you have a relationship. When you actually have the reality that your partner's like playing video games and stuff like that, and you're not going on the beaches and you're not going on hikes, well, guess what? That's misaligned expectations. That is the source of all the frustration. So you need to get really clear on expectations and not try to promise the world and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be the best employee, don't know. Just, I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to do the best that I can. What is the goal? I'm going to work towards that goal. That's it. And then you secretly, hidden within your own mind, you have an intention. I'm going to surpass that goal. I'm going to beat that goal. And then you're going to take actions with it. Okay. So when I was a manager, these are what I used to say when you're having your first manager meeting. These are the most important things that you need to cover in your first meeting with your manager. As a manager, I need to get to know you. Why? Because I need to know what motivates you. I need to know if you're going to be driven by money, if you're going to be driven by recognition. Like, I want to be able to connect with you, find out your similarities and stuff like that, so that we can develop a friendship and stay connected, right? A professional friendship. The second thing, what's supposed to happen in your first manager meeting is you as the employee are supposed to say, hey, boss, teach me the secrets on how to excel at my job. If they're not teaching you those expectations of what you need to do, then you have to take it upon yourself to ask them, what are you asking? Give me the answers to the test. I need to know, how do I do well? All right, tell me the secrets, tell me the strategies. What are the best performers doing? What tips and suggestions can you give? All that other kind of stuff. And then lastly is, as a good manager, I need to know what your expectations of me as a boss are, and I need to know what my expectations of you and your expectations of me. So again, I have to manage over 600 interns, right? You start to develop things into real simple, right? Meetings were very, very fast. I said, as a manager, I only want 3 things from you. Okay, here's what I want from you. Number 1, stop with the excuses. Take 100% responsibility for your life and everything that you do. What does that mean? That means when you screw up, you say, boss, I screwed up. This is what happened, and this is what I learned from it, and it's not going to happen again. I promise you this. Please forgive me, right? What else? Do I have to lecture you? No, you've already taken responsibility. You've already owned it. You've already said what you're going to do in the future so that it doesn't happen again. What else? It's the people say, oh, well, this bad thing happened, and I think it was them. And guess what I have to do now? Now I have to lecture you. Now I have to say, well, what could you do differently? Hey, this can't happen again. You take the sting. It's like you sting yourself. People don't realize that, right? The second thing is, I need you to be open in terms of communication. I need you to be vulnerable. I need you to tell me what problems are you having. Now, I put a little asterisk near vulnerability. Why do I put that little asterisk? Because you have to understand your relationship that you have with your manager. You really want a good relationship so that you can trust them. And so you want to be vulnerable, share stuff, but you have to be careful that you can't share everything. And I believed I was a good manager because I would always tell people, you have to be very careful with what you tell me because listen, even though I try to create the safe space where you can share stuff, I said also there's certain things that you can share with me that I can't keep safe. If you're telling me that you want to cut yourself and harm yourself, I can't just keep that quiet. Like I need to report that. We need to protect your health, right? And so the story that I love to share was I trusted my boss and I basically saw this other employee who was doing something that I didn't think was good for the company. And because I had developed such a good relationship, I ended up sharing what this employee did with this boss. Guess what she did? I thought she was having my back, that she would look out for the best interest of the company. Guess what she did? Her own ego was triggered by this complaint. She went to that employee directly and started, yelling at her. I'm like, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. That's not what happened. I thought I was naive. I thought I was trying to help the company. That coworker came up to me. He's like, Tim, why did you tell that person what you're like? I was trying to help. I wanted to create a vulnerable space and I wanted to share what's best for the company. She's like, if you have a problem with me, can you come to me directly? And I'm like, wow, very, very important lesson. Even you do have to be careful what you share with your managers. If they have a big ego and they're out for themselves, they can distort and twist the things that you say. So develop that trust, but be vulnerable, but with a little asterisk. And the last thing is tenacity, like we talked about. Obstacle, go over the obstacle, underneath, side to side, through it. That's what a manager wants, that you'll be resourceful and you'll find, and if you don't know what to do, guess what? Come to me as the manager. I'll help you. I'll help you find that thing. So here's the tips on how to actually have your accountability meetings with your manager. Use a spreadsheet to track everything. Why? Because guess what you're going to do in your meeting? You're going to say, hey, boss, hey, manager, let me tell you about all the great accomplishments I have this week. Oh, that's great. Why? You have to sell yourself every meeting of how awesome you are. They don't teach you that. You could think about being humble, but they're too busy. If you don't tell them about their accomplishments, they're not going to remember. Then you also have to tell them when you screw up, right? Don't share every time you screw up, just only the big stuff that could have a big impact, right? Because again, it's not about you screwing up. It's about, hey, boss, this happened. I screwed up, but this was the learning moment. This is what I learned from it, and I just wanted to let you know. And that's all they care about, right? They should. And then the last thing is your struggles and challenges. Managers just want to solve problems and go on with the rest of their day. But here's the secret sauce that no one teaches you. And they teach you this in the military and something like that. If you have a problem, don't just say, hey, boss, I have a problem. How do we solve it? Do I have to solve everything for you? If you really are confident on how to solve a problem, you just do it yourself, right? But if you have a problem and you think of a solution, but you're not sure whether it's the right thing to do, if you have any doubt in your mind, guess what that's a signal of? Go to your boss, go to your manager. They know more. They are supposed to have more competency and more experience. And so if you come to your boss and they say, hey, boss, this is the problem. And you know what? This is what I thought the solution should be. What do you think? They're either going to say, Tim, that's awesome. That's exactly what you should do. Go ahead. Guess what they're leading? That Tim is quite impressive. He doesn't need much management at all. He might have managerial potential. Or they could say, oh, thanks for that solution. No, we definitely not want to do that because of this, this, and this. Got it? Okay, great. I'm so glad I came up to you. Thank you so much. Now I'll do exactly what you said. Boom. And then you do it. They're like, whoo, that person's very teachable, very coachable. See, again, you have to understand this employee manager concept. Also, it's a time to make requests and proposals and ask questions. So in summary of this part 3 of the presentation, in order for you to keep your job, avoid the mistakes that I've made, please, people. Stop being a social butterfly. Get your work done first, then being social is the reward. Don't get distracted with unimportant stuff and emails from other departments that is not important. Get your job done first. Don't be a perfectionist, and start helping everybody else. Focused on you, what you need to get done. Stop pretending to be a workaholic martyr and say, oh my God, I'm so busy, I'm so overwhelmed. It's like, no, you always have time to do the things that you want to do. And if somebody is overcommitting you or overwhelming you, like a boss or a manager, you basically say, hey, boss, you push back. I'm currently have these things on my plate that are taking most of my time. You're asking me to do this. Where should I fit this in? Do I take this off my priority list? Do I just focus on this? Can I get some guidance here? And they'll help you prioritize so that you can push stuff off of your plate and not feel overwhelmed. Stop being judgmental and quit the inappropriate jokes, right? Have with friends after work where you can be as inappropriate as you want within reason, as long as it's payful and you have a good intention. But again, be very careful in the professional environment. People won't promote you or like that if they know you as the jokester and worried about you offending somebody. Understand your job as a manager is to set expectations, mentor, hire, fire, hold accountable, and make predictions for senior management because they need to know of a pulse check of what we're going to accomplish. And if you're going to be a good employee, guess what you have to do? Take 100% responsibility, have open and honest communication. Sometimes people don't want to be vulnerable to their boss because it's like, I don't want to look bad. Well, what's worse? Not saying anything, being afraid that you're going to look bad, then screwing up, and then them being mad, like, why didn't you come to me? And it's like, I wanted to look like I knew what I was doing. It's like, well, you didn't know what you were doing. That's the moment that you're supposed to come to me. That's what I'm here to do, to support you. And when you have obstacles, just find a way through it. Okay. So that is, and then the second part is the myth. If you work hard, you will not be rewarded or promoted. The truth is, do what the manager and team expects of you, and then under promise and then over deliver. If they say, if you know that you could complete that assignment and they want it to you by Friday, you say, okay, I'll get it to you by Friday, but you in your own mind says, I can actually get that done today, or I can get it done Thursday. Then you do that because then you're ahead. You're under promising and over delivering. I basically got it to you earlier than the deadline. Oh, wow, this person's amazing. Okay. That's all about managing expectations. And then if you're an employee, have a spreadsheet of everything you do. And guess what that's going to help you with? When it comes time to writing your evaluation. You think manager's going to remember if you do biannual, like every 6 months or a year, all the things that you accomplish? No. You do the job for them. You go through that tracking spreadsheet and you say, I accomplished this, I accomplished this. And, it's like, oh my goodness, this person's amazing. Well, you're not going to remember that. And most people are not that conscientious to do that. So again, you've just saved your time for your manager from writing your eval because you kind of wrote it yourself. So these are the tips and best practices that I wish everybody knew. So that's the end of our time, exactly an hour and a half since we started. So thank you everybody so much. At this point, I'm going to take any questions. And so while we're waiting for any questions, please post it in the chat or, feel free to raise your digital hand or unmute yourself. There is a bit.ly link for the post assessment. I've also, let me see if I can post it again here for the post assessment. And yep, I just put the bit.ly link also in the chat. So you can actually fill out that post assessment. And then once you answer those questions, once you hit submit, there'll be a thank you page, and then it will have a link to download this whole PDF of this whole PowerPoint presentation. And then underneath that PDF is another bit.ly link to access a bunch of resources. That includes 49 of the most common questions, a resume before my edits, a resume after edits, so you can see what that looks like. You can see, a lot more stuff, all the different verbs that you can use on a resume and search that, as well as like 13 tips onto writing an excellent resume. So a lot of great resources for you. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you so much for watching this video clip about conscious leadership. If you are committed to helping to create more conscious leaders in this world, that is leaders with more humility, more integrity, more awareness that take constructive action, then consider helping us by making a donation. Our goal is to have 600 conscious leaders develop before the end of this year. Currently, as of December 1st, we already have 400 members. And again, with your help, we can grow even further. How can you help us? Simply make a donation. If you visit buymeacoffee.com/Electus Society, you can either choose to give a monthly donation and join, and you get different access to a lot of these different membership benefits, or simply make a one-time donation. Click on the heart support button, choose 1, 3, 5, or type in any amount of coffees. Hit the support button and you can upload your card information on the secure platform. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and let's continue our mission of building more leaders. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.